Hello, everybody. Jeff Mason with SimpleBiz360 podcast. We are so excited today. We are going down under into Australia with Matt Pollard. Matt, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. And if you could, we'd love to just hear a little bit about you. And if you could explain a little bit about yourself, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, likewise, Jeff. Thanks so much for having me on the show. I'm a huge fan of your book. So, that's given me great guidance as well over the years. But my name's Matt Pollard. I'm the managing director and a founder of Leadsun. We're a solar street lighting manufacturing company, and we've got our head office in here in Melbourne, Australia. But we've got a global footprint as well that stretches across each continent. I'm born and raised here in Melbourne. I'm an Australian. I'm a frequent visitor to the US as well. So I love your country and what it has to offer. And sadly, it's been a little while since I've been able to get back there. But I'm 46 years old and just really super passionate about what we do here in at Leadsun, and I think the impact or the positive impact that it has on the world. So it's an exciting future, and it's just amazing to be part of it.
Excellent. Well, we're so excited to be able to ask you some questions today and educate the audience on what role you're playing in this whole movement towards harnessing energy and being able to go natural, if you will. So we're really excited about it. And so, folks, just a little bit before we start questioning, if you're interested in subscribing to the show, if you like the show, if you're watching on YouTube, please go to the lower right-hand corner of your screen. You can hover over the cursor there, and you can hit the subscribe button. You do have to be signed into YouTube to do it. We've got a bunch of other places to subscribe. Plus, Matt, for your friends as well, we're on 26 audio platforms. So, anywhere from Google to Stitcher to Spotify to Apple, we're on those platforms as well. So this show will be broadcast on 27 different venues. So we're very, very excited to have you here. And just a little segue on how we got to know each other. And I thank you for reading the book. That's awesome to hear. Gordon Manzione, a high school classmate of mine, was our fond guest on episode 43 as we plugged in with him, and we just had a great time. And he had mentioned to me that, it'd be great if you could interview Matt. Gordon works for your company. So that's how I got to meet you, and we've connected electronically. And folks, got to be a part of an exciting webinar with Leadsun back in December. I signed up for it and listened to it, and I've probably watched it 4 times, Matt, to be honest with you, and there was so much meat in there. So I'm excited today. I think folks are going to learn a lot about solar lighting. They're also going to learn a lot about business. And so we're going to have some fun, just uncovering all that. So why don't we just start now? So just give the audience, if you could, a kind of a picture of geographically whereabouts your offices are in Australia.
Yeah, so we're in Melbourne. I guess people might be more familiar with Sydney, even though that's not the capital of Australia, but that's where Gordon's from. So that's on the central east coast of Australia. Melbourne's down the bottom on the south east coast. So when you say down under, we're literally down under. We're at the very bottom there. We're in the state of Victoria. Melbourne's a great city. I mean, it probably doesn't get the global recognition of say Sydney does, but we're very fanatical about our, culture and sports, particularly, we host the Australian Open. So that's a Grand Slam tennis event. Yeah. We've got lots of good things happening down here in Melbourne.
Well, very exciting. So yeah, you've got the just for geographic purposes, Sydney's on the coast on the Tasman Sea there, and you're a little bit further south in the Victoria Province. You're just north of Tasmania, which is an island.
That's it. Yeah.
So you're right there. So that's kind of the geographics of where you're coming from. So a little bit about your upbringing, Matt. What's your family upbringing, if you could?
Yeah, I was born. I've got three other older brothers, so a household of predominantly boys. So obviously that was a tough job for both my parents. All my brothers are much older as well, so ranging from 15 years age gap to my oldest brother to 4 years to the next oldest. So I guess that in itself, kind of led to me having to do my own things. And, I didn't have that kind of companion sort of, I guess, that brother or sister, that I kind of grew up with. So I wouldn't say it was lonely, but, it was kind of, I just had to, kind of use my own devices to, have fun around the house. And probably part of that was, my father, I was able to, just do lots of things with him growing up, and Dad, unfortunately he had an eye condition where essentially from the age of about 14 or 15 he was legally blind, so he had to kind of drop out of school at a young age. He was very good academically, but it just got to the point where he couldn't actually see the chalkboard. But he was a lot of inspiration for me in my life, and particularly in those formative years when you're growing up. And we just sort of hung out a lot. And I think that's probably where, if I can look back, and sort of join all the dots, I think it probably begins back there, and sort of, just seeing how Dad went about his life, and having that challenge that he just never, ever kind of conceded that he could not do things, even though he couldn't really see more than, 10 foot in front of him. But, he was constantly just, tinkering on the car, doing jobs around the house, building things. And, I got to kind of participate and sort of just see how he did it. And, the way that he did it was really remarkable, because I guess he had a lot of retained, when he could see. And the story is that he was able to, he got taught very well from his father, and, how to build things and just use his hands. And, that kind of has been imparted on me as well. And just seeing how you can overcome adversity, and at the same time, just, be able to conceptualize something in your noggin, and then just kind of, sort of use your hands and work through it. So I feel fortunate that I was, able to have that experience with Dad. It wasn't obviously perfect, but I think if I was to look back from where I am today, a lot of that can be, I can thank my father for. But that's a bit of my upbringing, just being close around the home, and from there, I was able to take on an electrical apprenticeship with my older brother, and so we've had this family. Well, we started a family business, and that's kind of led me to where I am today.
Interesting. So Dad, very inspirational, kind of a lesson in the power of the mind. If I am capturing this correctly. I mean, we've seen Albert Einstein, I believe, say that we only use perhaps 5% of our mind. And when you're forced to rely on, your mind, when you can't see like that, I would imagine you saw your dad really dig deeper than most people did to get things done. And combining with muscle memory, right? You mentioned that he had good eyesight for many years, where he was able to learn things and remember those things. And the way around an engine, that's pretty cool story, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of felt like if he could have kept going, he would have been an engineer or something like that. He was super clever, working through problems and conceptualizing something. And then actually able to, just use his hands to kind of do it. It was just remarkable in how he was able to just do things. And for someone that didn't actually know that, he had he was legally blind, a lot of the times you wouldn't know. He was kind of just tuned in to conversations. He was looking sort of in the direction. And he just had this ability. It was amazing where, he could just walk through hallways and doors and, you wouldn't know that he was blind, but he definitely was.
I have a friend of mine that has a severe macular degeneration, and it is amazing, young man, amazing to see how that person is able to navigate life just like you and I would, and you would never know. you would never know that they have a limited capacity like that. So, well, thank you for that background. Very interesting. And you got a little taste of the family business and entrepreneurship through your brother. So did you attend university? Did you go to a form of higher education to get kind of further on in your education?
I went through school, so, went all the way up to, the end of high school. And I think beyond that, I was in two minds, Jeff, as to, what sort of pathway I'd take. I kind of had this, an electrical apprenticeship, I guess, that I could just take on, and that's through that family business. But I've always had a real passion for innovation, and particularly electronics and gadgets and, audio visual, all those sorts of things. So what I did do is I began an audio visual engineering course at a university here in Melbourne. And, that ticked a lot of boxes for me. And I was quite certain at that point in time that that's the pathway I'd go on. And, I began that, and, what I found was it kind of wasn't quite hands-on as much as what I thought. My expectation is that within, a year, after that, I'd be kind of putting sound stages up and production sort of sets and all those sorts of things. But I just wanted something at a bit more, sort of to dive into something and almost at a component level. And that led me then to begin an electronics engineering degree. And, that was great for another 12 months. And I think, again, it just got to that point where it was really heavy on the book, and so, of course, that's got to be part of it.
Sure.
What I was after, though, was just, again, getting my hands kind of dirty. And I think that kind of gets back to my upbringing, as I mentioned, with Dad, and just always seeing him, and I was, helping him along. So it kind of led to a bit of a fork in the road for me where, I had to make a decision about, really committing myself, to this tertiary study, and perhaps, that was the realization that, I just wanted to work as well. So, I had a great opportunity to take on an electrical apprenticeship. And for me, that was the best of both worlds, where, I was able to obviously get to study and learn all the knowledge that's required for, an electrical trade. And at the same time, you're hands-on, you're working, and so that ticked a lot of boxes. So that's ultimately what I ended up pursuing, and I became a licensed electrician. And we specialised in outdoor lighting. So that lighting theme has always been there from a very early age as a part of my career. And just kept pursuing it. I've always trained up as well. So, I went out from just doing electrical. I had a passion for some other things. So I actually learned air conditioning as an example, and telecommunications. And it was just, once I really got that appetite, for the industry, I just wanted to then keep diving in and try and do as much as possible.
Well, certainly you were right on the, you were right on the coattails of a great technological movement across the world. And I had been involved in, and never got to the component level type stuff that you do by any means, but I worked with a company in the 80s that back then, when personal computers were new, you had the aptitude to, or there was aptitudes to repair the product, rather than today we just discard it most of the time or throw it away. So, we had about 120 bench level technicians that would repair system boards and power supplies and floppy drives. And we had a clean room that would, fix hard drives. And it was very interesting to see. And I noticed then that, that you could just see and smell the need not only for the software side of the fence, but, certainly the componentry level, and working with your hands and doing the work was going to be something necessary in the future. So I also think it's a great story, Matt, because there are so many people here in America. I don't know about Australia, but here in America, there are, really young kids struggling with, hey, do I really buy into that higher education, life model, or do I go another path? And we're finding that certainly a lot of the trades and a lot of the, just that whole pool of people that 40, 50 years ago would go in those professions aren't going into those professions. And we're going to have a void sooner or later. So it's exciting to see. I think there's a movement now afoot here. You can feel it, that a lot of the infatuation with the trades and with electronics and with things like that are becoming more, I guess, front and center, if you will. So yeah, great story. Well, the other thing I noticed, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, Matt, listening to the webinar that you guys put together in December, I could tell you have a lot of passion for what you do. How did this, did it come about, from your days working with your brother and getting into the family business, or how did this evolve?
Look, that's a good question, Jeff. And I think for me, it's, I mentioned gadgets before, that was kind of what set me on this pathway, I guess, to, doing audio, visual or sort of electronics and those sorts of things. So, I'm a complete geek when it comes to anything new, and particularly with electronics and, gadgets and all those sorts of things. So that's always been around me. And even like my oldest brother, he was the guy that, he got the first VHS kind of player, and then when, say, Dolby Digital came out, the surround sound thing, he got all the speakers kind of set up at home. So we were having like movie nights, and I thought that was just so cool, that was my kind of first taste, into, just putting things together and running wires out and building things. And I guess when you talk about passion, it probably comes from that and a bit of that upbringing and sort of those influences, that my brothers had. If I was to look backwards now, I'd certainly say that that sort of passion has been there, but at a base level, it's just been through innovation. Anything new, I've always just wanted to be a part of. So, I probably think that's led me on the journey to, as I went and we did lighting. So that was anything from sports lighting to car park lighting, but it was that traditional, electric light.
Yeah.
So, and I was just after something new, it was kind of like this, electricity has been around since, the late 1800s and solar energy was just starting to emerge. This is going back 20 years ago, right? And battery technology, all these sorts of things. So, it was just this kind of marriage, I guess, of, solar, battery technology, and then the whole lighting thing. That was what, sort of like a, pardon the pun, but a light bulb moment where, what if, all these things could be kind of tethered together.
Well, listen, I can, genuine enthusiasm is really it's a marketable aspect of being a business professional, and you certainly have it, and I can tell it, and it comes through loud and clear when during the webinar, and it really, I had to ask that question. So 2005 was an interesting year for you because you went down the path of a solar lighting project that I guess, if I have this correct, it initially started out to be a $10,000 adventure, and this installation on one single light turned out to be a $13,000 adventure. And explain, because it seems like, again, that light bulb went off in 2005. Is that correct?
Yeah, and look, Jeff, that wasn't our product, and in the webinar, I was just sort of explaining, that was my first sort of touch point with, what a solar light was. Up until that point, I didn't really know much about it. I was hugely interested, but we were doing a small project for a municipality here in Melbourne. So we're just doing our normal work, which is electrical contracting, and we got asked by this municipality if we would be interested in just installing this trial solar light that they wanted to put into a parking lot at a boat ramp, right? So we were the ones that, they requested us, can you go out and find a product and sort of, this is just a trial. We're looking at sort of maybe adopting this over the next few years. So that kind of led me on that sort of journey, I guess, to start, looking into it. And there wasn't, being such a niche or even a micro niche, there wasn't a lot out there. And at the time, there was just one or two suppliers in Australia. And I just did my own research, but I was just stunned with how much it cost. And it was like literally $10,000 just for one light. And I just remember how big and cumbersome, it was. Big batteries, like, car batteries, there'd be 4 of them, that would have to be put, you'd have to dig a hole and put a pit in the ground, and you'd put these big car batteries, and they're heavy, right?
Wow.
I mean, it was breaking. But so you had the cost of the actual infrastructure, and then what we found when it arrived on site, and we had to put this in, it was huge and heavy. So then we had to get cranes to come in and lift it up and put it in, and we had like a bucket truck as well. So this all added up, and that was the example. It began at $10,000, and then quickly it was like $13,000 by the time that it was all in the ground. So that was back in 2005, and I must say at that point I wasn't really thinking, oh, this is going to be the future. It was just more, I can't believe it costs that much, and that probably led to, later or over those next few years was like, no, there could be something in this, but obviously $13,000 is way too much. We're gonna have to bring that right down and start exploring what other new technologies are out there.
And again, for one light, that's an extraordinary amount of money. So so you mentioned that from somewhere in 2005 on through 2008, you called it a journey, and you went on this journey throughout, I guess, countries in Asia. You went to look at suppliers, you went to look at technology, you went to look at things. Explain that journey, that 3-year process of where you started to realize solar lighting was the future, and just tell us about that if you could.
Yeah, I think at the time, Jeff, as I mentioned, there was this, solar power energy that was coming on and being more adopted. Batteries were a bit behind, so they were generally lead acid batteries, which is like a car battery, right? So, and also at that point in time, and this is probably the pivotal sort of catalyst, I guess, into how we're able to do what we can do today. But that was with LED lighting, right? So that was going away from old traditional electric lights that use a filament or gas, and they're high wattage, so high power consumption. So that's a bit of a killer, when you've only got a finite amount of solar energy intake and battery storage. But you got this large power consumption with the actual, with the light. So, but LED was just starting to emerge as well. And it was just getting, the noise that it was getting louder and louder. So given we were in lighting and I had this experience with this solar light, that led me on a bit of a discovery journey throughout Asia and really just going to lighting fairs, meeting up with manufacturers of LED, battery, solar, all these things. And I guess after that, I kind of realized, the technology was just, coming to that point where it was commercialized. So, really it was the convergence of lithium ion batteries that I discovered, and they've been around for a long time. But, it was becoming scalable now, and LED was, not so much of a thing that you'd have like on a little torch. It was actually becoming, more usable, for light, substitute lights around your house. And so all these things, it was just a perfect kind of marriage. And that's where I kind of thought, well, hang on, that $10,000 or $13,000 product could actually be almost halved or quartered, if we were to adopt these new things. So it took a few years, I guess, because I was having to pay the bills and, kind of do what I had to do with my other work. But it was that 3-year period, I guess, it was just kind of, after several visits throughout Asia. And by the time 2008 came about, I kind of felt like I had all the ingredients there to actually do something with it.
Now, were you with Leadsun at that point, or was Leadsun not even an entity at that point?
No, it began. That was one of my first relationships, and through one of the other founders of Leadsun. So they had a manufacturing as an OEM in Asia, and these guys were like really progressive. They were using this cutting edge lithium-ion battery technology. They were starting to use LED. They had these things, but they just weren't converged together. So that's kind of where the origin of Leadsun began. It was very early, and then I guess over that 3-year period to 2008, it was really about R&D and how we can put it together and actually make a product out of this.
So 2008, now you guys kind of have a plan for going forward, and what role has Leadsun played in the solar lighting profession industry, if you will, since 2008?
It's been enormous. From that big old clunky, $13,000, light, we were able to create something that would have almost equal performance, okay? And we created what's called a all-in-one solar light. So, rather than having, these big batteries in the base of the ground, running wiring and looms and, electronics in the base of the pole, big solar panels at the very top, and then you'd have a light. We're able to actually pack all this into one module, right? So you can imagine a solar panel, okay? And then we're able to kind of create a module so that we could put in a battery, a lithium-ion battery, which is about 1/3 of the size compared to a traditional lead acid battery, right? So it's lighter. It's also, a 1/3 of the size, but it packs as much energy into it, right? And it can actually discharge all the way down, to rather than say 50%, it can go all the way down to 90%. So, and with LED being more compact as well. So we're able to just create this all-in-one system that could be easily installed and more importantly, was affordable. It was $13,000 became more like $2,000 or $3,000.
Yeah. Excellent. So this is exciting, folks, because and Matt, you have to, put yourself in our shoes here in America. There's obviously a lot of, even under the Obama administration, there was a lot of focus on solar energy. It obviously is something that is front and center in our country. We've just gone through a period of time here in Texas and in the south of our country where, we got hit with some unusually cold weather, and we had, 30% of our energy was being produced by windmills, and they obviously were not able to be productive. And so it kind of upset the rhythm and the apple cart of the energy distribution. And so we've gone through some things here. And I think what's most interesting to me is that, as Americans sit here and listen to this, specifically, we're on grid lighting. So many of our municipalities, most of our public lighting is grid lighting, and you're really, Leadsun is leading the way in non-grid lighting for public pathways and public lighting needs and residential lighting needs. And that's what's really exciting about what you're doing. Talk to us a little bit about that whole, you've kind of adopted a foundation you guys call SMART. SMART. What is SMART still being used today in your business model?
Yeah, and great question. I think smart lighting or smart technologies, gets bandied around a lot. So everything's kind of smart, right? And what we wanted to do is to, really break that down and sort of give it a bit more meaning. So, obviously, we've created an acronym out of that, and SMART being sustainable, it's modern, it's adaptable, robust, and also it's packed with technology as well. So all those things merge together. I call that SMART, as opposed to just a dumb sort of grid light that just turns on and off. And what our solar lighting systems are able to do basically, they're all off grid, so they're completely independent, so that unfortunate circumstances that you guys had in Texas there, where you're relying on a centralized energy source, right? So it's all coming, they might have solar farms and wind turbines, but they're still getting fed into the grid. And
yes.
but what solar enables us to do now, whether it's in your home and by the addition of batteries, is to go off grid. All right. And I kind of feel people just have to, maybe 20 years ago or 10 years ago, even it probably wasn't quite there yet where you could actually do that. But by and large, the technology now is so much more advanced than what it was, that it's so easy to do, to go off grid, cut the cord, so to speak, and, do that in your house, but also at a micro level, throughout the world, there's 300 million streetlights, right? If you think about that, all those 300 million streetlights are all connected to the grid, and really for such a small energy output, do we have to be attaching these streetlights to the grid? No, we don't. We've got the technology to make them completely independent of the grid.
Yeah. Oh, listen, I think America woke up in December to that. I would have to think, Matt, that the appetite here is going to be much more aggressive going down the path of the future in converting to non-grid lighting. I mean, we've got a certain element of fear out there too, that, some bad actors, some hostile entity could take over a grid and collapse a grid too. And that's certainly, we've seen a little evidence of that just recently on what the impact of that is, because it really has ramifications that are far greater than just a light source or just electricity going out. It's got, huge ripple effect to it. So I find this amazing, and you guys do a great job on the webinar. And I don't know if it's available through your website or not. We'll get there at the end, but this webinar, folks, was really good. And you guys took the viewers through an exercise you went through where you did a comparison on pathway lighting, solar lighting versus grid. And wow, I mean, I guess I never thought about it being not in the industry. I never realized how many different benefits there were to this. I was blown away. So explain that a little bit, because grid and non-grid, solar versus, grid lighting. Wow. Tell us a little bit about that. And can they get that on the website? Can they get access to that?
Yeah. Firstly, they can. So we've got a media sort of part of our website where we constantly update new things like that. So that webinar is available and can be downloaded and viewed. But that cost analysis, I think, is really important. I think people kind of regard solar as being more of a green movement, and that for a long time was that was before it became scalable, because maybe 20 years ago the cost of batteries and were significantly higher than what they are now. So it was more about the green aspect, but now it's actually reversed. So it's much more about the economic sort of, the business decision about, let's run a cost analysis and actually compare, rather than just default to what we know has been the case for the last 100 years. That breaking that status quo. So the first step there was to actually just, let's compare the two. And what we're able to undertake was a real sort of project. And this was for a 1 kilometre pathway. And we're able to do an evaluation, in terms of, how much excavation work. Obviously anything attached to the grid, you've got to run cables under the ground. So before you even start putting lights in the ground, you've probably got, over 50% of your actual overall cost is about putting wires in the ground, right? And not only that, there's a lot of destruction, to the environment as well. I mean, you're particularly in these sort of parks and recreation sort of areas. There's lots of trees, around, and you've got tree root systems. So there's also an environmental impact through doing that sort of destructive trenching. But so a lot of the cost, I think, from overall, it was around about 50% of the overall cost was just in getting wires in the ground for the grid solution. And then after that, you got the cost of poles and sort of lights. But the way it washed out, we were able to not only compete 1-to-1, so we're able to get exactly the same number of lights, okay, because the technology is just that much more advanced now, where we're competing 1-for-1. And then the actual cost, I mean, we've got there's no digging and no wires. So, we're ahead to begin with. And overall, there was around about a 40% saving just from the supply and installation part of it. But then actually, when you worked it out over the next 10 years and 20 years, when you took into account the running costs of the electricity and you're paying fees just to have electricity available, not just being used, we came out even further ahead, over that lifetime cost. So, it was significant economical benefit, going for a grid-free, non-grid solar lighting solution than what it was for the more traditional electric lighting system.
Oh, and it was an amazing, again, for a layperson not in the business, it was amazing numerically for me to see the impact of that, and then, not even thinking about, not even thinking about the root systems of the trees, not even thinking about tearing up, recently laid asphalt parking lots and walkways and taking up, sod and grass that's been planted and, somebody's nurtured that grass along just to lay all this stuff down. And I'm watching a video of these two gentlemen, putting a small footing in a matter of hours. Your lighting is a big, huge, tall light on a hinge. So it snaps into place with a hinge. And then you've got things that kick into gear with your lighting, like, you've got, I guess, an attitude in the lighting itself that it darkens when there's no one near the pathway or walking on the pathway. It's at a reduced level of output for non-heavy traffic hours. You've got, and again, I'd love you to speak to some of this. You've got, you mentioned in that webinar that you can harness tremendous amount of energy on cloudy days, which I would never think that. And then you mentioned something about cold weather even being somewhat more advantageous to the list. So touch on those if you could, because I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, it certainly is. And just to circle back on that analysis, so one part of that was economic. Okay, so we came out nearly 40% more favourable, for the solar lighting, but also the time as well. So what we learned, it was possibly a 10 to 12 week process by the time, when you're dealing with municipalities and power companies and sort of getting permits to work and the work itself. So that turned out to be like a 12-week process to get, say, 12 lights in the ground, or 20 lights, I think it was, in the ground, compared to like 2 weeks, with the grid free. So not just economical, but also a time benefit as well. So with the technology, and that's a significant feature of our lights that Leadsun pioneered back in 2008 when we released the world's first all-in-one solar light, was a feature that we call Smart Eye. So that's what we call a passive infrared motion sensor that's also integrated onto the system as well. So essentially, what that's doing, it's got an area, a footprint, I guess, that ranges, around about 20 feet around where the light is. So what that's doing is monitoring any movement that's around the proximity of the light. So it's a real practical and smart feature that, unless you've got people around, what's the point of having the light working at 100% out, right, and burning more energy than what it should. And also, you've got to think about wildlife and sort of the impact of of what we call sky glow or light pollution as well. So having lights unnecessarily bright, which is something maybe we can touch on a bit later. It's called dark sky.
Yeah.
This is it's a smart feature. It's an obvious kind of feature, I think. But also the great benefit of that is that we're able to conserve a lot more power in the battery. So we're not unnecessarily having to have it operating as a dumb light where it's just sort of on off. It comes on at dusk and off at dawn. So this is autonomous in that it can just self-regulate, turn up when there's movement and people. When those people move away, 30 seconds later, it'll revert back down to a passive light. So there's still light on the area, but it's just enough so that you can see it as you're approaching, and as soon as you do, it activates and bumps up to that 100% lighting output. The other part that you mentioned as well, and this marries into, sort of obviously, people ask a lot, around, does solar work, when it's cloudy or is it only just when, the sun is shining? So obviously when the sun is fully shining, there's a lot more available ultraviolet light that hits the solar panel. So that's able to, sort of energize all the cells, and then that turns photons into electrons, basically. That's pretty, common sense. But actually on cloudy days where what happens is that the sun actually filters the light and scatters it in various directions. So you can get, quite intense UV coming through clouds as well. And the benefit of that is that it's non-directional. So it's more of a, like a blanket sort of, in terms of how it's able to, it doesn't quite have the penetration of direct sunlight, but to another extent, it's actually more reliable, if that makes sense. So it's constantly there. And perhaps it's around about 30 or 40%, compared to if it's direct, a beaming sort of hot sun on it. But certainly there is a misconception out there that, if it's cloudy, well, it doesn't work. And that's completely untrue. It does work, and anywhere from like 30% up to 60% energy, you can still capture, sunlight coming through clouds. Also, if it's cool, right? Heat is a great killer in terms of efficiency for electricity and the flow of current. So the hotter the weather is, whether it's ambient temperature or within the components, it's more difficult. There's more resistance for current to flow through. So what we find, for example, here in Australia, Tasmania, which is the most southern point of Australia, that's traditionally a lot more cooler than the northern states, but they still get great sunlight, but it's just cooler. That is like the perfect and most optimal sort of situation you can have for harnessing, sunlight, that then, having that, the current be able to just flow through without much resistance at all.
Interesting. No, very interesting. By the way, before we go on, I don't know if Gordon told you, but my sales agency, I actually do a lot of work in the public safety sector, and I do a lot of work with the tactical sector. So I did have a lot of experience for about 4 or 5 years working with lithium batteries, working with a lot of the rechargeable battery systems, a lot with the Cree bulbs. We used to use the brightest and whitest spot of the wafer on some of these tactical flashlights, and certainly lumens was our big, everything was lumen oriented. But I also work for a company called Tasmanian Tiger, which is a tactical bag manufacturer out of Germany, and they have manufacturing in Vietnam. And but the owner fell in love with this, the idea of the Tasmanian Tiger. So I sent Gordon a couple T-shirts. I'll have to get you a couple T-shirts just so you can have them. But certainly funny. But so
things, aren't they? Tasmanian Tigers. I'm not sure if there's many around anymore.
No, I saw a special. I don't know whether it was Discovery Channel or not, making the argument that some farmers, some folks in the rural area of Tasmania have seen evidence of there being pockets of the tiger there. But I think it still remains to be, figured out if they're there or not. But yeah, so very interesting. So folks, if you're wondering, is Leadsun active in the U.S.? Well, congratulations to you, Matt, and your team. Would love to you to spend some time and tell us about, because your prowess, your dominance has been primarily in the pathway lighting, the public lighting arena, and then you ended up becoming a part of a huge project in Florida. It's called the Epperson a project, and you've actually got the case study on Epperson. But explain that whole thing, because that takes you into the residential sector. That's really exciting for you because, that's right. It's got to be door opening all over.
Yeah, and look, the only way that we've been able to transition or offer this new channel, which is street lighting, and you're very right. So the vast majority of our products over 10 years has been really specifically designed for pathways and parking lots and those sorts of things. Now, yeah, with street lighting, there's a high demand for the output of light. So the great thing about our industry, Jeff, is that it's constantly improving. So batteries are becoming smaller, more compact, more being able to have more density of energy in them. So we're able to get more bang for our buck, in regards, and that's just going to keep going, right? So we're going to have smaller batteries that can actually yield more capacity, right? So, but the other significant part is with LED, right? So we spoke about efficiency, lumens and lumens per watt. Okay, so to give you a bit of an understanding of that, when I first, back in 2005 to 2008, when I went looking and shopping for LEDs and knowing a bit about them. So at that point in time, it was only around about 80 or 90 lumens per watt, right? 10 years later, or to where we are today, where we're actually at around 180 lumens per watt.
Wow.
So we've like doubled the efficiency, over that period of time. What's really exciting is that, there's still a lot more scope for improvement with efficiency. And I think they're predicting over the next 5 years, we might even get up to around about 250 to even 300 lumens per watt.
Wow.
So put it this way, if we started having a 70 watt light bulb, which is very traditional in 300 million street lights across the world, so 70 watts. 5 years ago, we were able to get that down to about 10 watts or 12 watts. That was the one for one. So LED was around about 12 watts, much more efficient than the traditional watt mercury vapor 70 watt light. Now we're around about 6 or 8 watts, right? Just through the improvement with efficiency. So you can kind of imagine in the next 5 years, we will only be a few watts, of actual electricity required to compete one for one for that 70 watt light source. So it's quite remarkable. The reason why I mentioned that is because that's kind of the breakthrough in regards to how we're now able to move into street lighting, because it does have a higher demand in terms of, the light output and where it's targeted on not just the street, but, the sidewalks either side of the street as well. So we were able to design a specific product. We call that Freedom. Okay, and we've got optics now on the lamp that are specifically designed for a street, not so much a pathway. And we're doing more improvement here as well, so we can get even more efficiency there. But a little bit about that project. Given we now have this technology available, we've got a great like-minded partner based in Tampa Bay, Florida, and we've got a terrific working relationship where we're actually continually improving, the product. But so far we've got around 1,600 of our lights, throughout a few different estates,
Wow.
throughout the Tampa Bay area. But what's really exciting is that obviously our product's going to keep improving, and there's more and more and more of these lights that are going to, completely off grid, independent from the grid as well. And we're looking at sort of 10,000, 20,000 of these lights, hopefully over the
Yeah.
next sort of 5 years being deployed. And that's just
Yeah.
around Tampa and in Florida itself. So look, it's not only exciting for Leadsun, but with my industry hat on, I
Yeah.
think it just gives more recognition around what the technology can
Sure.
do, not just through smaller type projects, but in largely deployed projects. So I really hope that becomes a trigger, for other areas outside of the US. We've
Yeah.
got a lot of interest here in Australia, for that as now, but you do need a pioneer,
Yeah.
I guess, to actually take that technology on. So yeah, kudos to our partner in Florida that's had the ambition and being able to actually execute that.
Yeah. Oh, very impressive. I mean, yeah, 1,600 lights, and you mentioned that it could balloon up to somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 if it matures. Now, Matt, is that something that technology, if mature communities, mature residential areas were to, let's just say a subdivision with, middle income, middle class homes, if you will, is it easy to just disassemble what's there, leave the wiring where it is, or, if it's underground, leave it there and just install this non-grid solar all-in-one lighting, the Freedom Light? Is it easy to do?
Yeah, look, I think and if I'm being completely honest, this works very well where you've got to start from scratch, so
Yeah.
obviously where you don't have to actually, do all that outlay
Okay.
for the underground infrastructure.
New construction. Yeah.
Yeah. So the fact is that, electricity, I guess, is, where it is readily available,
Yeah.
you can kind of tap into it. And so I guess,
Yeah.
from that point of view, the business case isn't quite there. But
Yeah.
certainly as you're about to construct a new residential estate,
Sure.
I think that's where we're just going to start being a bit smarter and exploring,
Bingo.
these sort of new readily available sort of technologies. We should be having lots more ambition to get away from the grid. Okay,
Yes.
so I know that we're adopting globally sustainability policies, and we're all trying to lower our carbon emissions. But again, if you think about it, worldwide there's 300 million streetlights, all consuming 70,
Yes.
100 watts. It's an enormous amount
Wow.
of
Yes.
energy consumption and also carbon emissions,
Yeah.
right? So I'm more thinking about where we're at the moment is it's about the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I want my kids in 20 or 30 years to kind of not, if we continue down this pathway of not being ambitious and getting this new technology, well, the burden of that, okay, is going to be carried
Yeah.
through to our kids and their kids over the next sort of 50 to 100 years. So now
Yeah.
it's the right time because the technology is available to start doing that. But I think it's more practical and much more of a business case, Jeff, when you're starting from scratch.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'd certainly love to. Out here we still have housing is in a very solid condition out here in the Midwest, and you see a lot of new developments still springing up. So certainly would love to see, as that continues to progress, to see, the, I guess, again, using that word, appetite for this solar lighting to go in there. And then, it just doesn't, if you've got a limited amount, I would think that some of these areas that have a limited amount of electricity to be able to be distributed, this would be a much better solution for any new development or redevelopment. I would just, that be my thinking. And I know that the desire is here in the USA. There's enough of it here that people are saying, yeah, we want to take a look at stuff like this. So I
and
think
that is exciting. You got to have
yeah,
ambition
yeah,
and appetite to do it first and
yeah.
foremost.
Oh, very exciting. So I wish you all the best in the Epperson, the continuation of that project. Very cool community, by the way. If you go on Leadsun's website, take a look at it. I mean, it's really quite astounding what they've put together there. I mean, who's the developer behind that, if you don't?
It's the Metro Development Group. So, and look, these guys are, the best at it in regards to how they do master plan communities. So, if you have a look on their website and you'll just see these amazing, what they call crystal clear water lagoons, right? That
Yes.
they build that you can swim in, and they're kind of, they're large enough. It's almost like you're at a resort,
Yeah.
and you're
Amazing.
a tropical island, and it's unbelievable, so it'd be a great place to live. I'm highly envious of, people that are able to kind of get in there, but a lot of it's all about cutting edge. They've got the America's fastest Wi-Fi internet kind of going around their community. They've got sort of medical on call in each house. They're planning to have autonomous vehicles kind of scoot around, electric vehicles scoot around the community, security robots and all that kind of stuff. So it's mind-blowing.
That really does. It looks, my mother lives in Austin, Texas, and she lives in a Del Webb community. So, I look at this, it's a senior at over 55 community, but you just look at this, 12,000 homes spread out over who knows how many square miles. And, and you could just see that as that expands throughout the country, that you could just, I just feel like they would be at least do a cost analysis on stuff like this and look at solar light as an option for the new development. So very exciting time for you and your company. And you seem so buttoned up and as a company. And speak a little bit, if you could, about the dark sky compliance. What is that terminology referencing?
Yep. So dark sky is part of what is the International Dark Sky Association. So that's come from the US and it's now expanded globally as well. So the premise of it is around mitigating against light pollution. Okay. And, I know firsthand, I've just recently moved from, sort of a suburb, a flat area of Melbourne, and I've kind of gone out into the hills now. So we're on the outskirts, but, that experience of kind of, when you kind of look up at night, and when I was living in the suburbs and you can barely see the stars.
Yeah.
Okay. And you kind of have that glow.
Yes.
And the stars are faint. Where I am now, okay, I don't have much of that at all. So, now I can actually see, it looks amazing. You can actually see stars at night, right? So, but what that really tells you is that, there's an enormous amount of light pollution. Okay, that's basically caused by, street lights and public lights by and large. Okay, so these are all the, what is the responsibility of municipalities. Okay, they're the ones that actually take on and manage all the public lights, across areas that you and I live in. Yeah. So what they're asking for is to have more responsibility around about controlling the lights. So it only directs downwards. Okay, so a lot of lights are tilted up. Yeah. Or the lens, or where the optics of the light are kind of sitting out, and they throw light upwards. So if you think about it, that's you've got light pollution. Okay, but then on the other side of that, if I was to go back and sort of talk about that 70-watt sort of light, and then you think, well, how much light is actually being utilized on the target area versus being just washed up into the sky? Okay, so it's two things. You've got inefficient lighting, and you've got electricity that's just been pushed up in the sky. Okay, so the actual out of that 70 watts, I don't know, maybe like a third of it is actually being used for the actual target area. The rest of it's just kind of washing up. So it's really important. It's something that we care a lot about. It works beautifully for us because we don't need bright lights, and we have a very sophisticated optics that we use that just controls the light, puts it exactly where it is. And from that, we've actually gone down the pathway of getting our lighting system certified and approved from the International Dark Sky Association. So I believe we're the only solar lighting company in the world that has actually gone through the rigor of getting that testing and then getting that certified to basically mitigate getting light pollution. And another part of that, Jeff, is as well the color temperature of the light. So you sort of mentioned earlier, you've got some experience with flashlights, and I guess for that purpose, you want the light to be as bright as possible, right? And you want it to reach so you need a cooler temperature. Okay, so that's more of a white light. So it works well with a torch, I guess, because you want to kind of get as much flashlight out there. But conversely, for a street light, you actually you want a softer light. Okay, so we go down to 3,000 Kelvin. Okay, so that's almost half of what some other traditional LED lights at. So it's a more comfortable light, but more importantly, you don't get as much reflection coming off the surface area. So much like if you shone a torch at a mirror, it's just the light's just going to bounce back, right? So, and that's a lot of that is because of the cool color temperature. But when you soften it, you get less reflection and less wastage, I guess, in light.
Well, I mean, amazing, the amount of energy that's wasted in our current, grid lighting. And, really became evident to me being out here in the Great Plains of the United States when I drive an 8-state territory. I manage some brands in those 8 states. And, if I'm at night driving through Iowa or Minnesota, Wisconsin, and you're in a very rural stretch, the stars are bright, it's big sky, you can see a lot, but, off in the horizon, you can always see the next major municipality all the time. And where Gordon and I grew up in New Jersey, we were so entrenched in the New York metro area there that I would hearken to guess that not many people today are able to capture an uninterrupted sky view within the county where we lived in, or certainly not many places in that county, because you have so much of that pollution, ebbing into your visual area. And it's quite amazing when, I was at a wedding this December, and we were at a winery back in the country out here in Missouri, and I went to get the car after the wedding, and there was really no pollution whatsoever out, and it's mind-boggling how prominent the stars are, how big the sky is without that pollution. It really, not to mention the wasted energy, but the stargazing will be a lot more fun for sure.
Absolutely. I think we're just going to, again, it comes back to that ambition, doesn't it? So you could say, look, if we were to look at a city like New York, well, clearly it's almost impossible to scale or to pull that back. But what we definitely need to be thinking about is, not just right now, but the future, our next generation, our kids, and doing anything and everything. That's our responsibility, right? That, we've got to not think about now, but think about, the next 20, 50, 100 years, in front of us. So where the action has to begin now. And it's great that, the International Dark Sky Association has kind of raised awareness of this, because to be honest, if it wasn't for them, I think we'd be just carrying on doing what we're doing now. And again, it doesn't help, the environment and also obviously carbon emissions now, because, a lot of that energy is just wasted.
Yeah. I didn't know that emanated from the US. I'll have to look into that, but it makes a ton of sense. So I guess in bids and in tenders and things, that's being addressed in the tender writing. And is that correct?
Yeah. And look, we're trying to really, lead the charge there. And as I said earlier, I believe we're the only solar street lighting manufacturer that actually provides dark sky certified. So, we feel a sense of obligation that, we got to, push this message out. So it's very much about, the Leadsun way, in which we I don't like the term selling, as much as, our job is first and foremost to educate and, help the customer kind of just understand firstly what what we do and the technology, and kind of look at the problem, and then we get to, hopefully later on down the track, if we do our job well, we're selling. But education is a huge part of what we do, and something like dark sky, most people have no awareness about. So we're really trying to stand up and raise awareness for it.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much for explaining that. It was definitely something that caught my eye, and I wanted to talk about. So, and again, I'm going to switch kind of over to the book side of things and customer centric focus and so forth. So, thanks for being a fan of the book. I appreciate it. I know Gordon is too. Excellent. And man, I don't think Gordon has missed a podcast yet. So I definitely am so thankful that he is, so interested in it. And so we're having a lot of fun here, and it's great to get, interviews with people like yourself to get different perspectives. So, what does Leadsun as a company? How do you view customer satisfaction? Flush it out for me a little bit, if you could.
It's hugely important, and unfortunately in our industry, even though it's small, but what is happening, there's an emergence of the cowboys coming in. Okay, so they just buy brown boxes, and if it works, it's great. If it doesn't, they're the ones that will just walk away. But we really regard customer satisfaction as it's our first priority. If you're not happy with the product and our service along the way, then we've failed in sort of delivering what we promise. So that's part of our brand promise is being always dependable. You'll see that on our website, and that's both inside our organization. We want to be dependable upon our work colleagues, but to be dependable to our audience and our customers, we've got to start from inside out, right? So we've got a process that we follow where we, I spoke about that education. There's a bit of a journey when you buy a Leadsun solar light. So we walk through every step, and what we hope to get from the end of it is some sort of testimonial or
Yes.
something like that, and really the proof is in the pudding, right? If they're not willing to put their hand up and sort of say, look, guys, you've just been outstanding, in what you do. And hopefully that's, more often than not, and it is, but also it's great to, just get feedback.
Yeah.
Sometimes, through whatever, circumstances, maybe we don't quite get it right, but we've got to learn along the way. So it's super valuable for our organization to ensure the customer satisfaction. That journey is a great experience.
So I think you said a couple of things that are interesting. So education obviously is a big component of what you do. And I think, yes, we are in a day and age where, there are certain businesses and industries that thrive and survive on the heavy emphasis on sales. But there's also, when you get into technology like this, when you get into taxpayer money, when you get into a little bit more sophistication level, you've got many, many different influencers being part of the decision process. That education becomes very, very necessary to eventually, be able to do a job and be awarded a tender or be awarded a project. And yes, you're right. I believe it was the gentleman from the Wodonga project. Am I saying that correct?
Yeah, that's it.
He went on, and you have a little 1 minute tape of him giving a testimonial. And, that's not only a testimonial for Leadsun, that's a, testimonial for taxpayer money, spending the money wisely, making sure you're spending it wisely. And then the thing that is just overlooked in all this, especially for pathway lighting, is safety. And I think, you guys hit on it quite a bit. He hit on it. And I think it is something that, we overlook a lot. But, how can non-grid solar lighting present a safer environment? Well, you do. You have that motion sensors that can, kick in, slow down, conserve energy, but when it's necessary, can be there. So I thought, thank you for letting me know, customer dependability is a huge word to me. It's part of my core. Certainly when you talk to customers or when customers ask you a question, the more you can demonstrate that you're reliable, you're always following through, you're dependable, the more apt they are to come back for more. That's what I've found. And I certainly, sense your passion, sense your commitment from everything you do. What would you say if you had to just identify some of the key core tenets of your customer service at the company? In addition to dependability, what else would you throw in there?
Look, I think it's really just, again, it's going above and beyond, okay? And we really take ownership of, we understand this is, it's a bit foreign, the technology, they don't know much about it. So we know everything about it, but, we've got to take a step back and sort of think through the customer's eyes as to, what it does. And I think if you can kind of manage the front end of a deal, as if you can really tick all those boxes and make sure the customer is comfortable, okay? And I think that's sort of something that, I've succeeded with, in my career is, really having that one-on-one relationship with the customer. And what we're trying to do is get a win-win, okay? So, it's not just Leadsun. I want the customer to win, okay? So, I think a lot of that happens at the beginning of the journey and before you actually sign anything up. And it's from that point, I think, it becomes a lot more fluid and easier, to execute, as long as you do the hard work and, kind of get that trust, in the customer. And, you spoke about, what I call the loyalty loop. Okay. So, to get a great customer, you have to be doing a lot of things right. But if you keep doing that consistently over and over, and then it becomes a loop, and, there's no better business than, customer retention, and you can save yourself a lot of money on marketing dollars and just from doing the basics right. And sadly, that gets overlooked.
Oh,
by a
my
lot of
goodness.
businesses.
Yeah. Loyalty loop. I love it. You don't mind if I borrow that on this over on this continent, do you? That's great. That's awesome. Listen, you hit a nail on the head. Overlooked, I think, isn't even explaining it properly. I really do. Man, there's just so much ignored business conduct and maybe not even taught as you're growing up in the business world. But, there's just so much to that I think that the more, we can understand that customers, customers pay our bills, and without them, we don't have anything. And to retain them, the cost that is overlooked on reinventing a lost customer because you just let them go away, you didn't service, I think it's a tragedy, and it happens far too often. I mean, I've seen it, way, way too often. So I'm glad to hear you say
that's a huge part and key message out of your book. And, if you don't mind, I just wanted to, I'm not sure if you can see that page there.
Evidence defeats disbelief.
Absolutely. And they're simple things, right? And again, if you just kind of do that over and over, do the basics right, it's quite remarkable. Like I say, you can save a lot of marketing dollars just from keeping, your customers happy, word of mouth, and that's the best way to do business.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you pointed that out. That's actually something that, when I did my podcast on evidence defeats disbelief, because it's something that's a core tenet to me. I was taught it in the 80s. And basically, folks, what it suggests is that if you use evidence, you can defeat a disbelief from a customer, because there are so many customers today, and I imagine it's the same in Australia. There's so many customers that just have one eyebrow up. They don't know what's the truth. They don't know how they're getting taken, by you. They don't know what you're embellishing on. They don't know what they can believe, what they can't believe. What is it? And the acronym DEFEATS is demonstrations, examples, facts, exhibits, analogies, testimonial, and statistics. And so you can use any one of those 7 pieces of arsenal in there, seven tools, to help that customer come to your side of the fence and see, these guys are really telling me the truth and they're proving it to me. And so when I did that episode, Gordon contacted me. He said, Jeff, I'm going to send you a video. You got to see this. And he showed me a pathway lighting project he did where I guess he was, if I remember it correctly, was in against 15 other competitors, a dozen or so other competitors. And just the fact that he went out there with a GoPro, a camera, and really tackled what he was going to do visually, painted a visual picture, and proved to them through his technology filming this, they were like, wow, this makes so much sense. You've eliminated, in essence, he eliminated many of the other people in the tender process by doing that. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And I get a kick out of the fact that I'm able to help and give some new advice to somebody in Australia. By the way, I did not invent that. That comes from Lanier Business Products. I learned that in my entry-level job, and they taught us that. So wonderful company, and they gave me some strong foundation. What else did I want to just cover? And not much. So what if you had to give, or you could give, any advice to young entrepreneurs? What would your best advice be to a young entrepreneur right now?
I'd have to say be bold and I think a lot about being an entrepreneur is being bold and brave, but you're going to get criticized a lot. You're going to get knockbacks. You've got to be persistent and really hungry to keep going. But I think you just got to go off your gut. I think it's a basic thing, but for me, I never went through like a full academic, kind of pathway, and I'm more practically intelligent than what I am academically intelligent. But it's really been developed, Jeff, through my upbringing and sort of just trying to be bold, take on new things, and that develops a great sense of gut instinct. About. And, I have a tendency just, as soon as all these dots kind of join up, I don't hesitate. Yep. It's kind of like, I know and I've made mistakes, occasionally over the time, but that's part of it. You're going to learn from Absolutely. That. But I wouldn't have it any other way either. So yeah, there's probably three things, and that's being bold, being persistent, but go with your gut and don't hesitate when you do actually arrive at that decision, and don't fear making mistakes.
I love it. I love that because intuition is it's a factor. And, I see it in my wife so much. For some reason, she's been gifted with that ability to have, she has that intuition into the situation and has a different perspective than I do. And it's just, I go to her, and a lot of times I don't go to her. I pay for it. I should have, but so I'm glad you said that, because yes, if you're a young entrepreneur, don't be afraid to measure your gut feeling and go with your gut sometimes. Right. I mean, it's excellent. So if you did have a chance to rewind everything, Matt, and do over, is there anything you would do over or do differently?
I think yes and no. I think to this day I still wonder, or I'm curious about what would have happened, say, if I didn't spend 2 years going through, trying to go through an audio visual engineering course, which I kind of got 3/4 of the way through, and same again with electronics. I could have just, as soon as I left high school, I could have just gone off and did this, taking this apprenticeship straight away. So, and maybe I could be a lot more advanced than what I am now. But I've got to be honest. I don't have. That's not a regret for me, because I absolutely, along that 2-year period where I guess retrospectively you can say, well, I could have just done the easy way, but that's given me so much more insights and so look, I don't have regrets.
Yeah, great.
Jeff, if I have one, I think it's probably work-life balance, right? And I think that's probably I'm gonna have to have a good look in the mirror one day and just think, well, maybe I could have done that better, because sadly as I'm pursuing all these big ambitions
Yeah.
that I got, you kind of do leave people behind you as well, and obviously
Yep.
they're the ones closest to you. But I'd say that's probably
Yeah.
a regret that I could have done things a bit better
You know what? I agree.
in that regard.
I mean, great perspective, Matt. And so
Being
many of
honest.
us, are, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, that's probably something we all look back on. I know myself, I spent 11 years working in Manhattan, commuting 4 hours a day, 2 hours each way. And you take 240 business days, multiply that by 11, and wow, you've got a lot, and then multiply that by 4. Got a lot of hours that you're away from your family. That, we moved out to the Midwest here, and my job I took out here was 11 minutes away. I was like, this is great. Life changed dramatically. I can be home for dinner at 5:15. This is awesome. So
there's a great saying, and if you don't mind me quoting it,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure, I'm just paraphrasing a bit here, but Steve Jobs, and I can really relate to this. So it's sort of like, to look forward, you need to look back, and sort of it's more of a joining of all the dots. It's sort of, then things start making sense about that pathway forward. But
Sure.
that's why I say I don't have any regrets, about things that I just alluded to earlier, because that's one of the dots, right? And now I can just join it all together and have more of a fluid pathway forward.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, just 2 more questions, Matt, and then we'll get to the end of our show, and something fun at the end. If you could just highlight for the audience here, what's the most unique aspect of Leadsun today? What would you point a finger at today?
Yeah, I think we've been very product centric. I think we've trailblazed really and pioneered this all-in-one technology, to the point now where it's gone crazy and it's been copied, and but I think the real asset of our business is just that longevity. We've been able to kind of go from bleeding edge technology to leading edge technology. So I think that is the asset, that we've been the ones that did all the hard work, the grind, and I think out of that we've got know-how. Okay, and that's something you can't buy. And I think that is the most valuable asset. I like to think of our sales team as they're educators, because they've got the know-how, and that's something that we've worked really hard at, and just ensuring that anything that we put out in the field is going to be fit for purpose. We do calculations around sort of ensuring that system is going to hold up 365 days of the year, not just when it's nice and bright, but obviously you go through seasons, and we want to make sure on that longest night of the year, that shortest day, middle of winter, our lights are still working. So that's just having that know-how as to how to craft it and put it all together.
Excellent. I mean, that's a great answer. I honestly, that's a word. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you really don't see that word used a lot in business. I mean, I don't know why, but it's an awesome answer. And so taking that know-how and catapulting into the future, I asked you, if there was anything I missed in terms of my questions I prepared for you, and you said, yeah, let's talk a little bit about, where does Leadsun go into the future? What do you see your role as a company in the future?
Yeah, definitely. We see ourselves as, I guess, the authority, the leader, and with that comes responsibility and, continual innovation, technologically of our product. So 15 years ago, we began the journey of creating the first all-in-one solar light. So what's in the future for us is going, using IoT, so integrating a new layer of technology that's not so much hardware, but it's actually software that we're integrating into the systems that can be wirelessly controlled and monitored from anywhere in the world. So, for example, that large project that we're doing in Florida at the moment, I can just pull up a web browser and log into that and go through every individual light, see exactly what sort of condition they're in, battery levels and how much energy is coming in, how much is going out. And beyond that, what's really cool and exciting and something that we've been, it's been an R&D for our company for the last year and a half is then creating like algorithms and kind of like artificial intelligence where we can actually predict weather patterns in advance, because that's all readily available to us, and then be able to say, all right, well, say they're, in Florida, you have hurricane season and there could be a week of really poor weather, right? And that's those sort of events that we can predict, and then the system will just, autonomously react to that. And it may just start, conserving more battery energy, 5 days leading up to ensure that we've got optimal sort of capacity, so that once this weather event, begins, we know that we can the system will just autonomously control the output to make sure that the light is always on. Okay, so I'd say that is a really significant part of where the future is going, is with those autonomous kind of artificial intelligence in the software. And luckily we've already layered the hardware, so when it's ready we can just
put it on there,
start layering this on.
Very cool.
And that adds great value to the customer as well, just knowing that whatever the situation and circumstance, those lights are always going to be on, where you can't have that same promise. And as you shared earlier, Jeff, in Texas, you had a cold snap and it's taken out the whole grid, right? So just being independent of the grid and having this technology just, continually layered onto it, it's, I'm hugely excited about that and what we can do in the future.
Well, that's great. Hey, there was something that I don't recall the particulars on it, Matt, but there was something that was mentioned about the Freedom Lights handle rain runoff differently, or something to do with rain. Am I mistaken in that,
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because we created that first all-in-one solar light, right? So for the right application and the right environment, it can work very well. Okay, but by and large, 50% of the locations, you just can't get the perfect orientation to the sun. They've got to be in the US. They've got to be facing due south, to make sure that the sunlight is on it as much as possible, and then you got the LED light facing that direction. So you're kind of limited. But another limitation of that is that, the tilt of the solar panel is not that high, okay? So our systems have been designed to have a specific tilt that's great for, optimizing the direction of the sun hitting it, but then it's a self-cleansing glass as well. So, there's a special layer that sits on top of the glass. And then it just needs, so obviously dust and debris will kind of try and sit on it. But as soon as that rainwater comes down, there's enough pitch in the angle to just basically wash it off. So by and large, they require very, very minimal maintenance because of the design and some of the properties that the glass is made of.
Very cool. So it's got self-cleansing. Yeah, I knew there was something particular. Thank you for explaining that. Yeah, that's neat. So folks, if you ever want to get in touch with Leadsun or look into their company, you want to go to the web and go to leadsun.com.au. The Australian .com always ends in .au. So that's how you would get Leadsun, LEADSUN, just like it says. So very cool. We appreciate that. And so, Matt, we have some fun. By the way, let me backtrack 1 second. And just to let you know, Mr. Manzione, you got yourself a gem there. He is a true leader and certainly beloved by our high school and our high school class. And, I really didn't know Gordon all that well during high school. We were with different groups and stuff, but and I didn't play football. I played soccer. But at any rate, we've really become very, very well acquainted over the last year. And let me tell you something, he's a very unique guy, and I know you know that. So
I do know that.
He's
got a particular set of unique skills. He's enthusiastic
absolutely
beyond anybody I've seen about, drums and
absolutely.
He's actually very, very good at it, and that was something I didn't know when I met Gordon I just think that's, we've all got to have a passion, in our life outside of work and for Gordon, that's drums. And, it's kind of influenced me a little bit. I'm a wannabe musician, and, I was able to pick up a drum kit sort of on the back of, what Gordon was doing. But that's more of a long-term project for me, Jeff, to
well, that's really
that Gordon would be at and other accomplished drummers as well.
That's so cool. That's great to hear. Well, he's definitely unique, and I'm really enjoying getting to know him better and better every week. So, well, thank you so much. So now we get to have some fun at the end of every show. Gordon and I, for instance, we both like rock and roll, and I want to do just a little bit to put out a song at the end of every podcast that kind of advances the rock and roll, whole part of culture, because I really do feel like it's the classics rock is it's going to have a hard time sustaining itself over the long haul. So I just want to bring it to everyone's attention. And so I ask every guest at the end if they could pick out what we call a lost in the shuffle track, and one of your favorite bands, one of your favorite songs, something that meant something to you. And I will let you tell it, but I've got to tell you, this pick is very stirring and I really enjoyed it. So why don't you tell the audience who you've picked and what song it is?
Yeah, I've picked a song called One Country, and it's from an Australian band, Midnight Oil. In the Australian music scene, they're icons, legends. They've been around for a long time. The late 70s, they were very, very prominent during the 80s and sort of to the 90s. But this one song, I guess, is not one that you'd hear on the radios, and that's kind of it's off an album called Blue Sky Mining that they released maybe in the late 80s, I think. Maybe,
I think it was actually
around,
might even be 1990, but late 80s, 1990.
Around that mark. But they're a political band, and they're very, very passionate about Indigenous Australians and essentially what was taken from them, when the first settlers arrived in Australia, and they've got those values. But this song for me is just really stirring, and it's basically about it's a bit of a journey, I think, and probably relative today as well. Like, our societies just seem a bit fractured and a bit broken, and through even what's happened in the US for your political campaign, and we've experienced things here in Australia as well. So it's kind of acknowledging, I guess, it is a bit broken, but there's an opportunity to come together, and I guess that's what the title is. One country, and sort of owning up to our faults, but that sense of reconciliation and sort of forgiving and coming together and respect. Is something that I think is really beautiful, and the way that the song is structured as well. They've got some beautiful harmonies with guitar, and then it kind of gets a bit of pace at the end, and there's some beautiful lyrics from the late Bones, who was the bass guitarist, and he sadly passed away recently. But to me it's just a really inspiring song, and probably relevant more so today than what it was back 30 years ago.
Yes, I would have to totally agree. And I pulled down the lyrics because I was fascinated with it. I was not familiar with One Country, familiar with Midnight Oil. We over here in the U.S., I think most of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s. I mean, we heard Beds Are Burning, and it's really, if I remember correctly, it's a song about the indigenous people, I believe. But, so yeah, you kind of knew they were, they've inspired people like REM over here, Green Day. I believe they were the inspiration for, a couple other bands. I'm drawing a blank, but a couple other political bands or, bands that got into activism. And certainly REM, Michael Stipe, their lead singer, has nothing but rave reviews about the band, and Peter Garrett. But one of the interesting things I read, I got to read you this. This is great. So I'm reading about, and I come across Bob Guccione Jr., who is with Spin Magazine, the founder of Spin Magazine, said of Midnight Oil, if they were from New Jersey, they'd be bigger than U2. How about that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
They got caught up in that culty band label. They didn't get a lot of mainstream play, but man, when I heard this song, I was moved, and I looked at a bunch of different versions of it. And if it's okay with you, I would love to post is it called Powderworks, their fan club? Is that?
Yeah, that's their kind of like a they're kind of like a tribute sort of fan club. And when as I mentioned earlier, when Bones, who was one of the long-serving members of that band, and he passed away, and it was really sad. And they basically did this tribute for him because towards the end of the song, you can really hear Bones, and he just had this really warm and sort of, just beautiful voice, I guess. And it's a beautiful honor to him.
Yeah. No, I agree. Listening to the original cut, I also listened to a live version from Brisbane, probably like it was on October 15th, 2017 version, where he was singing at the end. Yeah, and it is. It's very moving and stirring. But the fan club, the great version of it, I sent it to you, and you said, oh my gosh, this is great. So let's post that, and what it'll do, folks, if you want to check out the YouTube video about this, you'll see it up in the upper right-hand corner as you're looking at the screen. It's just a little, we call it a kind of like a card, if you will, electronic card. You just click on that, and you'll be able to go straight to that video. So very, very cool. And another thing I loved, he says twice in the lyrics, every man must be what his life can be. And, I just thought, that's a great, he says it twice in the lyrics. That's really a great little message too. Let's, kind of like be all you can be, but, certainly inspirational. And Matt, I just have to thank you very, very much. What an engaging interview. I really enjoyed it. I love your passion, love your genuine enthusiasm towards what you're doing and how you're trying to, be part of, doing life right, and and bringing that to the masses. And so,
thanks very much, Jeff. I mean, it's been my absolute pleasure and an honor as well. Thanks for inviting me on this show, and keep up the great work. I'm a big fan of your podcasts as well. So something I always look forward to hearing.
Thank you so much, Matt. Well, kudos to you. Have a great weekend. Again, we really appreciate it, and we will see you folks next week. Thanks so much, Matt. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.